Before I jump into this video, I just want to remind you that I am now taking bookings on my travel photography workshop in the beautiful country of Peru. If you're interested, click on me right now or visit brendansadventures.com for details. What's up? I'm travel photographer Brendan Vanson of brendansadventures.com, and today we're going to dive into the digital darkroom and explore some of these images we shot on the Enterprise rent-a-car road trip to Drumheller. On this channel, quite often, I take you out into the field and I show you how I shoot, where I shoot, what I'm shooting on. I often also take you into the digital darkroom and go through my image editing processes. But what I rarely do on the show is give you a glimpse into my mind frame as I'm editing or as I'm going through my old images. And I think one of the most underrated aspects of growing as a travel photographer, or any photographer for that matter, is the digital darkroom side of things and the self-critique and self-evaluation of things. Now, I think personally, I've learned much more when I'm editing images and when I'm going through the images I shot in the field than I do actually in the field. And I think it's a side of things a lot of photographers, and new photographers especially, dismiss. If they see a terrible image, they just delete it. They wipe it from their computer as quick as they can so they never have to look at it. When I see a terrible image on my screen, I evaluate it. I go through it. I try to figure out what I did wrong in the field. I try to figure out what my composition could have done to be better. I try to figure out what my light could have been, how my light could have been better. I try to figure out how I could have shot it better in terms of aperture, shutter speed, things like that. So I really evaluate the images I shoot terribly. On the other side of the coin, when I take good images and images I'm really pleased with, when I'm in the digital darkroom, I also try to figure out what I did right. What was the light like? What time of day was it? What was my aperture? What was my shutter speed? Is it sharp? All those things like that I try to figure out and then try to use those things in the future. So the learning process in travel photography and all sides of photography is huge after the fact in the digital darkroom. Now, the whole point of this Enterprise rent-a-car trip to Drumheller was to show you how you can pursue your passion. Now, passion goes beyond the road trip in photography. It goes to how you can make use of the images you took out when you were shooting. So I thought a good thing to do would be run through 4, 5, 6 of these images from the Drumheller road trip, and I can give myself a bit of a self-critique and explain to you what was going through my head as I was shooting these images. So let's get into the digital darkroom and have a look. So this is Drumheller. Drumheller is cool. There's lots of things to shoot there. You've got the Untitled Museum, you've got the prairies, you've got the canyon, you've got Horse Thief Canyon, you've got hoodoos, you've got an old coal mine. I mean, there's just a ton of things to shoot there in a small area, and that's one of the reasons I chose Drumheller. So let's start at one of the images, I guess, from the first day we got there, which is the hoodoos, and I'll jump back here in Lightroom. That's Calgary, obviously. So we first got there, and we got there late in the afternoon, so we already had this soft light coming. And we basically made a beeline through town, through the giant dinosaur statue to get out to the hoodoos. And the hoodoos are an incredibly tough place to shoot. You've got this beautiful landscape and this beautiful landform, but there's a couple issues with it. One, you're in this flat landscape and there's not a lot in terms of dimension or scale to it. Two, they're blocked off from the public, so it's not like you can go in there and have a subject sit on there, or you would ruin the geological formation. Three, you've got all these barriers all the way around it. And four, you've got this snow, which is a benefit, but it also makes things much more difficult. It's hard to get a proper white balance. It's hard to get a proper exposure. And this was probably the second image I shot out there, and I kept it because the light was cool, but if you look at it, it just looks flat. This kind of blends into the background. These hoodoos just don't look tall, they don't look out of place, they just look like a part of the landscape. And right away when I shot this image, I evaluated my position there and I moved right away to a lower position where I could shoot upwards. And so we'll move on now to one of those images. This is one of them. This is the image this image actually already sold a couple times in micro stock, which tells me that I did something right. And you can see that by getting lower to the ground here and shooting upwards, it adds a lot of scale to the image. I would have loved to have a subject over here, like a person just sitting there or standing there looking up, to add even more scale to it. but you're not allowed in here, first of all. Second of all, when you're out shooting by yourself, you have the option of putting a self timer on and then running in and standing there, or that's it. So really, I didn't have a lot of options. I just had to shoot it as it was. So let's evaluate this image quickly from a critique standpoint. The light's pretty perfect. We had the sunset over here, and it was a kind of an overcast sky, so it worked in our favor in terms of creating a nice exposure, but we didn't get a powerful sky. So that's cool about it. I do like how I composed it. It's at 2/3 here, the horizon. This is just at the edge of 2/3. The one thing I messed up here is this item needs to get cropped out. And probably that sign too. They're just distracting elements that if you're looking at this image, you go, oh, that's cool. What's that? So in post-processing, go in, use the clone stamp in Photoshop Elements or Photoshop and get rid of that, or it's going to distract the eye. You can't really crop this in, or else that's too far to the side, so you're going to have to clone stamp that. Or I'm going to have to clone stamp that because I'm the photographer and I have to do the work. As you can see, I was trying to simplify the hoodoos a little bit. I was trying to get low and I was trying to put them on the horizon, and that really worked with them. It made them look much taller than they were actually, and it also made them look more imposing. So getting low to this scene was important. Another important thing was trying not to capture all of it, but just one item sticking out or a couple of them sticking out. Now, I don't know if this will load quick enough because my computer's a bit slow, but the sharpness factor was unreal. This was one of the first times, probably the second time I shot that 16 to 35 millimeter on the Canon 6D. And if you check it out, it is sharp. I mean, it's mind-blowingly sharp compared to my old 60D with the 10 to 20 millimeter. In my opinion, it's much sharper. Much sharper, and you don't get any chromatic aberration. There should be chromatic aberration all along this hoodoo on any other lens, and you can see a little bit here, but I'm really impressed with that lens and body. With that 6D, out shooting landscapes, and the 6D is obviously meant for landscapes as a body, but with that 6D, when focusing on subjects out in the field in really low light, it's not missed on me even once. And that is absolutely impressive. Low light focusing is when you're shooting landscapes is something everybody struggles with. And to not have to struggle with that anymore with the 6D is awesome. Okay, so let's move on to the second day. Enough of these phallic-shaped hoodoos. Let's go to Drumheller number 2. This is Horse Thief Canyon in our first spot that we shot on that second day, and a really difficult place to shoot. We were shooting in the morning, so we had softish light. But canyons are always really difficult because it's really hard to get some scale to them. And I like to shoot them in really low light, but not extremely low light. So early morning, late afternoon, where you have these half shadows. If you have full shadows casting all the way across, it really creates exposure issues. But these little small shadows do well to create depth in the image and show you how deep the canyon is. It's still not an easy place to shoot, and this image by no stretch of the imagination is perfect. It's sharp though, it's colored well, it's got nice contrast to it. The one thing I critiqued myself about when I saw this is you see this canyon line here. I would have preferred to use this at 2/3, so just move it over here and lean into the image like that. It's a little bit too far to the left for me. Okay, let's move on now. This is our Enterprise rent-a-car that we had, which was a Kia Optima, I believe. And it was a good car. It was a really good car. But you can see here in this image the landscapes you get in Drumheller. You have the canyon down here. So Drumheller and the valley is all in here. And then you pop out of that and you've got the perfectly flat prairies. And that's really cool from a landscape photographer's perspective because you have the canyon and the prairies all within a minute or two. Very cool. So I really was happy with that. And we got a lot of cool images out on the prairies. You see you got these classic red barns here. And the light wasn't great because it was almost middle of the day when we were shooting this stuff. But in Canada in the wintertime, it's almost always low light. So as a photographer, that's very cool. As a human being trying to survive, it's tough. I'm tired all the time in Canada in the wintertime because there's just not enough light. Anyway, we'll get back into the images, and I want to show you some of these. This grain silo image came out very cool. We have this nice glowing light in the top. Let's talk about an image I messed up. This is an image that I really loved. When I pulled this out in post-processing and I saw this image, I was like, that is perfect. That is my favorite image that I've taken in months. And I just love the tones. I love the light in the sky. I love the two barns that are facing each other. I love the depth of field, everything. But if you look at it, you zoom in, it ain't sharp. And when you're taking images, they need to be sharp. And I messed up, and I don't know what I was thinking out in the field, but I shot a lot of images at f2.8 when I didn't need to be. I'm at 1/1000th, so I could have split that in half, gone f4, even f5 at 1/4, or 250th of a second, and I still would have got a sharp image. I still would have got this blur, but for some reason in my head, I thought I needed f2.8, and I messed up, and it cost me. So you can see it's not sharp here. It's not because I shook the lens or anything. It's because the focus is probably down in the foreground, because you can see actually this barn, this edge of the barn is a bit sharper. So it just didn't get the sharpness all the way across. Now it's not terrible. It's usable for things like Facebook and, you know, for showing off for people, but I cannot sell it. Luckily, I shot a tall image version of that, and you can see I changed to f5 here, and 1/250th of a second. And it worked, because since I shot f5, you can see the barn's now sharp. So people, if you're shooting an f2.8 lens and you don't need to be shooting f2.8, or your subject's a long ways away and the focus can get messed up a little bit, don't shoot it. Shoot f4 to 5.6. Those are the sharpest spots in that 70 to 200 f2.8 lens. The other thing is, if you want to avoid a problem like this, just don't be lazy. I was lazy with this image. I could have, and I should have, pulled out my tripod, set up my tripod, zoomed in on live view, made sure the focus was spot on before shooting it. But laziness gets a hold of us all, even professionals, and I shot all these images handheld thinking, you know, the shutter speed isn't that long, I can take all these handheld, and I paid the price. So don't be lazy. If you're pursuing your passion, you don't want to waste your images, make sure you do everything you can to get the best quality images possible. So even professionals like me learn the lesson. This image I want to talk to you about because of the post-processing, and it's not sharp as well. I kind of just messed around with this, testing a theory on post-processing. And again, this was f2.8. I wanted to blur out the foreground. I could have done f4 and it would have been sharp. And not only would I have a cool image, but I'd have a sharp image. So again, I messed up. But let's go into the develop module and I'll show you what I did to make it look like this. And it's quite simple. So I did your normal editing here, all the things you would normally do. But then what I did to make this pop was I reduced the saturation on everything except for red and blue. And the reason I did that is because I wanted the red barns to pop. And blue colors really offer a cold feeling to the images. That's why they call cool the blue side and then warm the yellow side of the temperature scale. So if you look at this, if I was to reduce blue, it still looks cold, but it doesn't have that same really cool feel to it. If you move up the blues to where I had it, it just inspires the sense of coldness. And I really love that. And again, this would be an image that would have sold probably as a print pretty well if it was sharp. But it's not sharp, and it's not even close to sharp, this one. This one, I think the focus is right here in the grass. So I messed up. Even pros mess up. Don't mess up. Pull out your tripod. Let's move on from images I messed up to images I got right, because I prefer it when I get things right. So we found this cool field with the hay bales. And again, I shot this on the 70 to 200 millimeter. As you can see here, at 75 millimeters. And what I did right here is I put the hay bale at 2/3, but I also have somebody over here that's taking a picture of the hay bales and adds scale to the image. It shows you how big the landscape is, how big the prairies are, how far you can see out on the prairies. And it also shows you how tall the hay bales are. So this photographer is back here and the hay bale's here. If this person was right up next to the hay bale, they'd be about this tall, half the height of the hay bale, or a little bit taller than that. And that color of the jacket, that orange, really stands out. It really pops amongst the yellows and the oranges. So I'm really happy with that. The thing I'm not so happy with is the flat horizon right in the center of the screen. And that's not something you can really fix that easily unless I was to say, move over to the right and zoom in a little bit harder on the photographer here, but then I think I would have lost a little bit of that scale. So I'm not too concerned. When you break the rules in photography, sometimes it turns out, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, I think it works. There's pump jacks all over that area, and it's something living in Alberta that I've always loved and I always wanted to shoot. And I'm really happy with it, how this one turned out. Other images I shot of the pump jacks were kind of boring, but I like that this offers scale. And you've got another one blurred out in the background here, and you've got the edge of the canyon there. So again, that's an image I'm really happy with. You can see I put this at 2/3 and 2/3. So from a composition standpoint, really happy with how that came out. Midland Coal was our second night shoot. And I shot this typical image of Midland Coal. And then I thought to myself, I need to get more creative. I need to zoom in. I need to try to get more out of one subject. It's so easy in photography to look at one subject, shoot one image, and move on. Even an apple on a white piece of paper can be shot 55 different ways. And that's a thing I always take with me. I always try to think, how can I take this one single object and build it into multiple images? How can I get the most out of this? So I usually take the most obvious image first and get it out of the way, as I did here with the typical classic image of Midland Coal, the coal mine. And then I explored a little bit in terms of angles and using different leading lines. And I came up with this, which I'm really happy with. And all this is zoomed in using leading lines and symmetry, and pulling off a really cool image that has like this old school feel to it, this really kind of old west feel to it, which is what this is from. Midland Coal is from the Wild Wild West days, and that's the feel that this image gives me. And of all the images, of all the classic images I took, something like this, that's by far the most powerful and tells the most of a story, and that's what I'm trying to do. The post-processing for this was quite simple. It was just, I just flipped it to black and white in Lightroom, and I popped the contrast using various techniques and lots of clarity. So when you're out at a subject, don't just shoot the big picture, explore the subject, try to get as many images out of one subject as you possibly can. Okay, let's move on again to this bridge, and we're talking about scale a lot in this one, and that's something I've been working into my images more and more. I think when looking back at my images from 2013 to 2014, the biggest difference is now I put scale into it, and it's a huge difference. If I was to just shoot this bridge here, it would be a cool image, it would be a bridge. But when you put a person in, it evokes a lot of emotion, it evokes like a lot of feelings that just a bridge doesn't. So you've got myself, I've set the 10-second timer, run out and shot the image in a cold scenario, looking cold, looking desperate, looking almost a little bit badass. It has a very rock album feel to it, which is what I was going for. So when you're shooting images, find scale. This bridge was really difficult to shoot because all these bars are not symmetrical, as you can see here, and it was hard to line up the image. So the one thing I ruined with this is I should be right in the middle, and as you can see, I'm just off to the left a little bit. If my head was a little bit to the right, it would be perfect. But those are things that are really hard to do when you don't have a photographer and you're doing self-portrait style images, that it's really hard to get right in the field, and I'm not kicking myself too much over that at all. Let's go into the Dinosaur Museum. Museums are always really hard to shoot. I like to bring a human element into the museums, as I've done here with somebody looking at the T-Rex skeleton. And I think it adds another element of awe to the image. If it was just a skeleton, it doesn't tell a story. It's just a skeleton. With a person there, it tells a bit more of a story. I was also trying to storytell by using, where is this image now? Trying to crop down and get the museum feel out of it and making it feel like it's more natural out in the desert, which the Tyrrell Museum does pretty well as it is. So I stretched across the barrier. You can see I messed up a little bit. There's a piece of the barrier here, which I can crop out right now. And So I was trying to remove all elements of the museum feeling to it, with the exception of this background, but I love how it kind of tells a story. You've got the skeleton coming out of the really animated version of what it might have looked like back in the Badlands of Drumheller back in the day. So I really like how that came out. I'm not a fan of shooting in museums at all. That's very difficult, and it came out really well. Let's look at the sharpness, and it's sharp. I'm impressed with this 6D. This was shot at 1250 ISO at 1/20 with a monopod at 20 millimeters. And there's a little bit of noise in the dark areas, but that's probably because I brought out the shadows a lot. But it's sharp. I couldn't be more impressed with that. One more image here. Let's go to the very last one I took, or the second last one I took. And again, this is the thing you need to do in museums, is try to make it feel like you're in a museum, but not in a museum. So you want to remove all the placards, you want to zoom in on subjects and things like that, and kind of make it feel like you're out in a different world, which is what I did here with kind of a Jurassic World image. And again, we zoom in and you can see at this ISO 1600 on that 50 millimeter lens, f2.2, it's sharp as nails in here. And yes, there's a bit of noise in the black spots of the eyes, but it's not bad at all considering I shot this on a monopod at 1/25 of a second. So yeah, I can't tell you how happy I am with these images of Drumheller. Generally in 3 days, you keep about 5-6 images and sell those images. From Drumheller in 3 days, I managed to send off about 20 images from the stock, of which I think 18 got accepted to different stock agents, and that's awesome. So again, I want to thank Enterprise Rent-A-Car for making this trip happen, allowing me to pursue my passion. It's been an awesome time. And if you're one of those people that is renting a car a lot, I can't recommend highly enough Enterprise Rent-A-Car's Plus program. When you sign up for their Plus program, you're basically signing up for unexpiring points that you can use later on for things like free upgrades and free rental days. Also, right now, Enterprise Rent-A-Car has their Plus Your Points program going on, which means double points on certain rentals. It also means bonus points in certain situations as well, such as renting a car through Enterprise in Europe. Anyways, that's it for the show today. I want to urge you to head over to my website, brendansadventures.com. And when you're over there, sign up for my newsletter. When you do so, you get a free copy of my adventure travel magazine, Vagabundo Magazine, which is full of some sweet travel photography. And yeah, I also want to tell you to subscribe to the channel. There's tons of cool stuff coming up. We're heading to Whistler in just 2 days, and then we're off on a huge American road trip across the Southwest, the South. It's going to be unreal. We're going to get a ton of cool images, I hope, and we're going to have some fun as well. So I urge you to stick around, and I'll see you next time. Later.